Hi, and welcome to episode 4 of the 905er podcast with myself, Roland Tanner, and my co-host, Joel McLeod. Hi, Joel. How are you doing this week?
Doing well, Roland. Thank you. If our listeners remember, a few weeks ago, we had a former teacher on to discuss the back-to-school plans that we were busy hearing from the provincial government. Today, we have the chair of the Halton District School Board, Andréa Grenbenc, as well as the vice chair of the Halton Catholic School Board, Marvin Duarte, on to discuss on the ground what the situation is like in terms of planning and getting our schools all back ready for day one in the era of COVID. Proved to be a complex process. It was a very thoughtful discussion, I thought, that we had. We went into a few things I learned that I didn't know beforehand about it, and I think it kind of gives a perspective in terms of what our school boards are going through on the ground as we prepare for this deadline that's only 3 weeks away. Roland and I think, had a great time interviewing. We learned a lot. We're hoping that you'll learn a lot as well, and here it is. Okay, so Roland and I are excited to have two experts or officials from the Halton education system with us today. First off, we have Andréa Grenbenc, who is the chair of the Halton District School Board. And we have Marvin Duarte, who is the vice chair of the Halton Catholic District School Board. Thank you, both of you, for taking the time to come on the podcast today. We are about 3 weeks away and change from the start of the 2020 school year. I understand that HDSB has released their school plan, correct, Andréa?
It has. However, due to the announcement that the minister made on Thursday, our staff is currently analyzing it for any implications and changes.
Okay. And Marvin, HCDSB has still not released their plan. Is that correct?
That's correct. We had a plan which came to the Board of Trustees last Wednesday. And the trustees have asked for some more information from staff. And in the meantime, the Ministry of Education came out with new set of guidelines. And so all put together, there's work being done right now.
Okay, so that kind of goes into my next question. Because as you both said, that the ministry has released new guidelines, new information, and there was new money allotted to the boards to help with this. The minister made an announcement back in May that the boards respectively, you be responsible for coming up with a plan. Later, changed that to he wanted you guys to look at a hybrid learning model. And then after that, Premier Ford made remarks stating that he wants students back in school full time. So that's 3 different models. And I'm wondering, how did that affect your planning processes as this information from the top was being fed down to you?
So the minister had actually in May or earlier said that the ministry was going to come up with some plans. They'll have a plan for us. And then on June, I believe it was around the 14th, said our plan are basically these criteria for boards to come up with their plans. And so our boards had actually, my board had actually, and I know the Catholic board has as well, started working on the potential sort of the basics around creating a plan starting in early May. Mm-hmm. And then we kind of came to slow down as we knew that a plan was coming. And then when that was released, and then we went full bore on trying to come up with these 3 plans. Mm-hmm. And then as time went on, different items started coming in and our plans would be adjusted. And then every board had to have their plan vetted, basically. Though it's not an official approval, it is either sort of supported or there are red flags given to the board when their plans were presented to what the minister calls the central table. And then once those plans were vetted, the ministry then came back on the 30th and said, okay, going forward, it's going to be the hybrid model or the adaptive model, as they like to call it now, the adaptive model for the secondary and for certain boards, open for the rest of the province, and a full comeback for the elementary model. And then we keep getting these other announcements coming in, like the one last Thursday, even though it's not in the documentation about the 50% of the students' time in person in the adaptive model. That's not what the original documentation said. It said instructional time. And so that's thrown all those boards that had come up with plans into a reassessment mode. And it's forced us to extend our survey time.
On that note, I'm going to speak kind of as a parent here, and my perspective of this whole process has been, it feels very much like we're rushing to get this done. And I was saying to Roland off the air here that it feels like we're rushing to get our homework in at the 11th hour, and it's half done, to use education terminology. And I wonder, is that am I wrong in sense that, or do you as board members feel that this is the case, that we're rushing to get this done? We have less than a month to go to the start of the school year, and there's a lot of details that need to be sorted out. The parents want answers to, and I know that they're asking you guys as the board trustees, what are the answers to these questions? And a lot of this is very complicated to figure out. And my question is long-winded, but it comes down to, like, why are we rushing to get this plan done when we've known that we've been in a pandemic since March? Marvin, I'll let you go first.
Do you want to take this?
Sure. Thanks, Joel. I'd like to take the very cautious approach here when you said we are rushing to get things done. So basically, there's too many uncertainties right now. We are in a situation which is dynamic, which is changing almost every day, every other day. And so the ministry is trying to take an approach where they try to cover bases and try to instill confidence in parents and try to give guidelines that make parents confident to send their kids and welcome back, make the kids feel welcome back to school. So things are changing here. I know both our boards have been working, the staff has been working very closely and long hours, has been putting long hours in the summer. And I wouldn't say they are rushing now, they have been working steadily and throughout the summer. But with the changing guidelines, what do? I mean, you got to work with the reality that things are changing. And so the staff has been, they themselves do not know what to do. And so they are doing their best. So I would take that approach that they've been working steadily, trying to follow the guidelines. The guidelines keep changing. And at the end of the day, the staff wants to make sure that our kids are safe when they get back to school. That throws, it's a huge thing. We do not want to tell the parents, send your kids to school, and then somebody falls sick, and then that's a bigger problem that we have now. So it's a cautious approach which we are taking, which appears that we are working slow, but we are not. So I would say that, it's going to be changing in the next 2 weeks too. We are going to see changes coming. We are going to see new guidelines from ministry coming. But I wouldn't say we are rushing. We are taking a cautious approach, which is necessary in times. We need to keep our kids safe. We need to keep our teachers and staff safe. So there's going to be work to be done. Yeah.
Then I just want to one follow-up, Roland, and I'll throw it over to you. On that note, Marvin, I understand, okay, if the guidelines are going to be changing going forward, even up to the start of the school year, then do we have enough time to ensure that our schools are safe? Is it prudent to maybe do what BC did and push back the start of school maybe a month, maybe a couple weeks, just to make sure that we are in the best position possible to make sure that our schools are safe for not just the students but the teachers and the staff that we rely on?
Very good question, Joel. And yes, you're right. We need to be taking an approach which is correct. We need to be taking a cautious approach, and you are correct.
Would you send a letter to the Ministry of Education requesting something like that to be pushed back a couple weeks?
So we have a meeting coming up tomorrow. We have a special meeting coming up tomorrow. The staff has been working on certain aspects which we asked them to work on. Trying to minimize class sizes. Let's see what happens tomorrow.
Okay.
And if required, yes, that's the right way to go. But I do not want to jump ahead of myself, and let's wait for the reports to come out tomorrow.
And Andrea, would you concur with that?
For the public board, we actually have a special meeting on Wednesday, and it already includes a motion to write a letter to the minister about several issues. One of them, first and foremost, is please stop surprising us. We need solid. You can't keep changing the rules of the game. This is no game, but I'm just using that analogy, and expect everything to go smoothly. We still have to timetable our high schools, and normally we start doing that in the spring. Mm-hmm. So mm-hmm. The other thing to remember is that boards have no way. We don't have the ability to push back or delay our time. We have to get approvals from the ministry in order to do that. We also have no way, really, of raising funds on our own. The tax rate is set by the ministry, and it goes to basically into the provincial coffers. So, and then comes back to us again, basically is how it works. So we cannot personally say, okay, if we want to lower the class size average for elementary, we can't just raise taxes or anything, even have bake sales. We can't do that sort of thing to make that happen. And
to that point, I believe one of the most recent sort of Friday, I think it was a Thursday announcement, but late week announcements was the implication that boards could kind of raid their reserve funds if they have them. Is that, well, first of all, do you have reserve funds? And second of all, do you think that's a fair request for the province to make? I'll start with you, Andrea, again.
Okay, so we do have reserve funds, and those reserve funds are, some of them are already committed in other ways, and some of them are internally committed. So, but we've already dipped in to, I believe it's 6.1 million that we've been able to dip in, but it doesn't actually make much difference. The way the minister spoke, it sounded like this is the golden ticket to be able to reduce the class sizes in elementary to 15 students per cohort and be able to spread out. But even just to hire enough teachers to meet that goal, we would need $100 million, actually more than that.
And that's just the Halton Public Board?
That's just the Halton Public Board, just for elementary and just for teachers. So we're not even talking renting space, which we would need to do, especially in North Oakville, South Milton, as Marvin knows, they're exploding. So there's not a lot of space available, even within our own schools. It's tight. So I know I hear from Burlington constituents all the time about why aren't you using the high schools and things like that, because we've recently closed 2 high schools. But we have to look at the entire region as trustees. And it's people don't realize that for us to be able to spread out elementary would still be a problem. And even using those schools, we would be dedicating a whole bunch of money just to Burlington, which is an equity issue big time. We would be screamed out at across from Milton, from North Oakville, and even from Halton Hills to say, hey, why are you concentrating a huge amount of funds in Burlington? We have these issues. Our children count too.
And Marvin, is that the same experience with the Catholic Board as well? In terms
exactly the same. There's no golden ticket, as Andrea pointed out. The thing is, if the public, I don't have the actual numbers with me right now, but I'm assuming that if it's 100 million in the public board, it would be 30 to 40 million in the Catholic Board. Yeah, so that's kind of a challenge. And besides capital funds, all boards are mandated to have capital reserves. But if we are planning on building 2 schools in Milton. We have a high school which is there, which is just sanctioned, as well as the elementary school. We need the funds there, and so it's committed. Money has been committed. But yes, we have capital funds. I don't think that's sufficient to take care of the load that's going to come to reduce the sizes to 15.
On that note, I know in Toronto, Mayor John Tory has offered the Toronto District Board to find additional space within the Toronto Toronto properties, their community centers, et cetera, libraries, et cetera, to help for students if needed. I'm just curious, have any of the mayors of Milton, Halton Hills, Burlington, or Oakville made a similar offer to either board? Or if not that, have you approached any of those municipalities to ask for some kind of offer to use their space? Marvin, I'll start with you first.
Yeah, if you want to ask me about Milton, quite frankly, I would say there's no space in Milton. Okay. Absolutely, at a community center or anywhere you go. Oakville, there is some kind of possibility of reducing the class sizes and using spaces, but not a whole lot. It's the number of 15 is virtually not possible across our system, at least. And the public, I'm sure it's not possible. Maybe 20 or something, maybe the right number, but yeah, I'm sure staff is looking at that. We have to see at the report for tomorrow.
Andrea?
So using what we are allowed to use in our reserve funds that are left after us already committing a portion of our reserve funds would allow for just around one extra teacher per elementary school. So there is no point. And we have not been approached by any of the 4 municipalities. And because there are no funds, there is no point in us approaching them. Yep. We can't spread out. And on top of that, we would be dealing with huge transportation issues. Right.
Okay. That's something I didn't think about.
and it was just sort of leads me into the question that has been kind of implied through this process, but I haven't heard anybody state overtly, but there's a different approach being taken with primary children and high school students. Why do you think that is? Is it the suspicion is that it's teachers are kind of being used like childcare, and that younger children can't stay at home if their parents are working, so they have to go back to school. Is that ultimately your understanding, Andrea?
I would say that there is definitely an economic imperative that is trying to be met by having students, elementary students back in the system. And I can understand that from the point that many parents are struggling. When I was speaking a few weeks ago, having some interviews, a lot of the producers I spoke about said, that they were having, this issue was hitting them personally, especially when I was talking to a woman. So, and I understand that. So what the province needs to do is fund appropriately, so it's safe. That's what needs to happen.
And again, I'm editorializing somewhat here, but it seems to me, and you can, Marvin, you can certainly correct me if you'd like to or not, that the province has been reluctant to provide the kind of sums that are needed, and that it perhaps has shown itself willing to spend in other areas. Do you think that's a fair criticism?
I'd be cautious to say yes or no over there. But I'd just like to add on to what Andrea said regarding parents wanting their kids going back to school. We had a survey some time back, and 60% of the survey parents said they want their kids back to school. So in elementary, yes, people want their kids going back to school. And it's not everybody has the luxury of working at home. I do, but not everybody has that luxury. In secondary, the situation is slightly different because of the way the subjects, the kids choose their subjects, and they got to be moving from one class to the other class, and they intermingle with other kids. So that's the reason I'm thinking that they decided to keep the class sizes smaller there. But in elementary, the kids do not generally cross from one class to the other, so they just made a blanket rule and said, go back to classes. That's one thing. Second thing is in the older schools, the class area of each class size is a little bigger than the high schools. So that may be the thinking of the ministry when they said all the elementary kids go back to school, because they can probably ensure spacing in the classroom. Not the JK and SK, that's different, but the other classes, I think they can manage spacing. So that might be the thinking of the ministry.
Well, to that point, actually, I actually spoke to a teacher who teaches elementary, I believe in this grade 13, grade 12 sort of age group. And the feeling was that if most students return, and I understand everybody kind of has an opt-out, it would be very difficult to teach in maintaining social distancing was, I don't think I'm putting it too strongly, almost impossible was her feeling. And just the nature of what children are like, and also that the kind of our modern teaching isn't necessarily a teacher standing at the front of a class with a chalkboard, but individualized approaches to students walking around. There's a lot of proximity involved. Do you recognize those challenges, or is there anything do you think there's any way to resolve those sort of inherent difficulties?
So yes, in today's day and time, the model of instructing has changed for sure, and we have some platforms, D2L and so as such, which are tools basically for providing the education to our students. But is that perfect? No, it's not. So what we are trying to do is, and we talked about this at length in our previous board meeting, is how to enhance the learning experiences of our kids. So there were a few suggestions for distance learning, and staff is working on that again, and how best we can make online learning exciting to the kids as well as reassuring to our parents. Because parents need some education too, because we did not learn in that system online. We learned physically, being present in class. Since
you brought up Marvin, I'm going to jump into that quagmire, because if we remember back in March, the solution was going to be distance learning was going to help save the school year. And this is me editorializing, of course, but I'm going to say I've talked with a number of parents and a number of teachers about this, and no one has good things to say about distance learning. They understood that it was a stopgap solution, that we had to do something, and it was, I think, just pulled off the shelf and thrown into the mix, and it left a lot to be desired. I'll say that much. Having the lessons learned from that experience, and it looks like distance learning is going to be here to stay, from directives from the minister. I'm wondering what changes are you looking to ask for your providers to fill those gaps, to fill the spots where the distance learning just did not live up to par. And I know that HDSB, you've chosen Google Classroom as your provider, if I'm not mistaken. Andrea, correct me if I'm wrong.
It's Google Classroom for elementary and Brightspace for secondary.
Okay. And I believe, I don't know what the Catholic board is deciding. I think that's still up in the air.
D2L.
Okay. So are you going back to your providers and saying, listen, this did not work well in these areas, and these areas we'd like to see these changes made? Are you able to do that? Do you have that kind of flexibility or that negotiating power?
Okay, so just a couple of things. When we went into distance learning, I know it was definitely not an optimal situation. The thing is that our teachers had to pivot on a dime, and I've heard good experiences. I've heard of horrendous experiences that happened. And the teachers just have now been trained on distance learning. I teach at McMaster in a distance learning course, and it is a completely different beast. It's not something you can't just take something that involves working with actual hands-on stuff in the classroom and easily transferring that over to something that is online. And I would say our teachers tried as hard as possible to do it. Having said that, we have, as a board, offered workshops, training, and I know a lot of teachers have also taken it upon themselves this summer because they knew it was coming, whether we were starting in a remote setting, all this talk about the second wave and potentially beyond. They knew they had to get on board with this and be better. Teachers want students to succeed. They do. You wouldn't dedicate your life to be a teacher and, actively watch everything fall by the wayside. You want your students to succeed.
That was it. I was just wondering what changes or what you've gone back to the providers to say we need to to fix things just weren't working. We'd like to see changes made to make it more equitable or more viable an option for students and teachers.
So on the technology side, there have been a few suggestions that have gone back to Google Classroom, and I'm sure since D2L or Brightspace is actually a Canadian company out of Kitchener-Waterloo, there is probably a conversation going on, though they are actually, that's what I use at McMaster as well. They are kind of long-standing companies, and I don't know if it's the technology that needs a lot of changing, but more how it's used. And I think people didn't really understand how to use the technology. I guess that's all I have to say.
Marvin, your comments?
Like everything, the more you use the tool, the better you get at it. So it's D2L was thrown at parents, they're thrown at kids, thrown at teachers. Some teachers had not used the tool before. So as you use the tool more, you get better at it. You iron out the quirks that exist. And so I think, if I'm not mistaken, our two boards work very closely where this is concerned, where curriculum is concerned. And if I'm not mistaken, Andrew, you can correct me. I think first there's a PD day which is dedicated to the teachers to sort out the differences on these platforms. I think the first PD day is dedicated to teachers and teachers training on these platforms, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
so we're getting there.
There are a few PA days before the school starts, and they're trying to cram in a lot of information, health protocols, and everything.
Well, I guess
into those days.
I guess that goes back to, like, do we have enough time to do that? Because a big criticism that parents had was the distance learning. A lot of them felt that it was a poor substitute for the in-class structure that we've all lived and been raised on for our entire lives. No, and I don't think anybody was criticizing the boards or the government. It was just, the pandemic happened and we literally had to rush it to figure out something. But the concern is, we now know what worked and what didn't. How do we prevent the bad stuff from being, like, are we just settled on what was set for us, or can we improve on it and make it something truly better? Andrea, I see you're raising your hand there.
So we held summer school online this year, and which included some elementary courses. And it was very interesting that I've received a number of very positive reviews, and it was interesting. The parents, emailed me saying I was very skeptical considering my experience going, for the spring. But this was excellent. And I think that I know what the board is doing, and that is to find those champions, those that were successful, and using them, picking their brains, making them mentors to be able to spread those pedagogical, just spread it around the board. And we've also dedicated some money specifically to helping with that. We have a couple of positions that are in our budget to specifically support the online environment to help teachers be the best they can be.
I just want to jump. We're running out of time, and I just want to sneak a couple of questions in under the bar before we have to stop. And you've been very generous with your time. Something that I know from the teachers I've spoken to over the years, long predates COVID, is the issue of ventilation in classrooms, and certainly just the fact many classrooms still don't have air conditioning. Many classrooms were built in an era when architects decided that windows that open weren't such a great idea. Is there anything? Obviously, this costs money. Is there anything that your boards are able to do to improve the ventilation situation when it's been shown, I think, pretty clearly now that there's an association between ventilation and spread of the disease?
I think many of our schools are new, and from the information that I have, all our schools have air conditioning, with the exception of 7 schools where the gyms do not have air circulation. We are investing in equipment for air purifying in all the schools, and I think the government has allocated some funds for improving the system, but that's not enough, as usual. But that's where we are at, and we are working on that.
So
well, actually, could I just qualify the question a bit? How many schools would you say have? What kind of percentage of schools do you believe have air conditioning? As I would understand it, as something that actually cools the room down, and ventilation, as in making sure that the air is being changed regularly.
Yeah. In the Catholic Board, all schools have air conditioning except 7 schools. The gym do not have air conditioning. Which needs some attention.
And Andrea, in the public board, is it similar?
So we have most of our schools have air conditioning. That's not to say that air conditioning is everywhere in the school. All of our new schools, of course, have. And we have a program that we've been funding out of our reserves for many years called Close the Gap. And it is to bring those older schools, as much as possible in those sort of HVAC systems along with IT, et cetera, to try to bring them up to, we'd like to get them to the standards or to the experience of the newest schools, but there's not enough money. And the $50 million that the minister spoke about last week, there are 72 publicly funded school boards in the province. So that's nowhere near even $1 million each. And just to add air conditioning to a high school, in not even the whole thing, is like $1 million. And there's 3 weeks till school. So there's no way that is going in time to satisfy this year, going into this year's school year.
In terms of, and it's something I have a little bit of a bee in my bonnet in as someone who's sometimes interested in architecture and building design and things like that. Just opening windows. I think it's one of the most profound mistakes when we stopped putting windows that open in buildings. Is that something that could be done relatively cheaply in buildings to just get some fresh air in? Or is that am I being completely unrealistic?
I understand from our superintendent of facilities that I think almost all of our older buildings, windows open, and the newer buildings all have the higher end HVAC system. And we've now I'm not sure about our oldest, actually probably our oldest schools do, like Central and Georgetown. But we've repaired all the screens. They've been actually working on that this summer to try to get those the windows in the best working order we can.
We've probably gone beyond our time limit, really, and we should really thank you so much for your time. And I know there's 1,000 other questions that the parents and teachers alike would probably like to ask you, but you've both been wonderful in how open and frank you have been with your answers, and we really appreciate that. And we're so glad to be able to help a little bit in getting the voice of our elected representatives to the public in Halton Region. So thanks so much for joining us today. And all the very best with it. And obviously everybody's hopeful that this will work out well. And I think people do appreciate just how hard everybody involved is working, and that obviously this is not something that anybody could plan for. Well, not easily plan for before it happened in March. And that these are huge and intractable problems that are being dealt with at record speed. So thanks so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Roland.
It's my pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you,
Thank
Andrea.
you so
nice
much.
meeting you too.
Nice meeting you too, Marvin.
Take care.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks again to Andrea and Marvin for spending that time with us today. I thought that was absolutely fascinating, Joel, and they were quite frank with some of the challenges that they were facing. I think probably you could always also perhaps read between the lines in a few places they're obviously constrained about how directly they can criticize the province, but certainly seems like there are a few things. Certainly the kind of weekly announcements is a big issue that has made life difficult for them.
Well,
And,
I definitely think it's a case of trying to come up with a plan, and then you come up with a plan, and the province says, okay, now I want you to do this as well, which as we're discovering, the devil is in the details on this back to school. And I think it's not a blunt instrument or a blunt policy that you can write down and say, okay, now we're going back to school. It's very clearly it's got to be a fine-tuned machine on this return to school venture. And I find that what Andrea was saying about wanting the minister to just say, this is how much money you have. This is what we got. This is what you have to play with. Make it work, as opposed to this drip, drip, drip of announcements that I don't blame her. It would drive me nuts to say, okay, we have a plan. Oh no, now we got to do this. Well, how does this affect our planning, our budgeting, and what we can do?
it feels like we've had at least 3, if not more, sort of iterations of the provincial plan, and the boards are doing their best to, okay, this is the plan, right? How do we make this work? And then the plan changes, and the bigger issue probably is just the issue of funding. That the province is putting some money into this, but really not a lot.
Well, Andrew was saying like this $500 million announcement that Minister Lecce announced last week. It sounds like $500 million. That sounds like an awful lot of money. But as you pointed out, when you break it down amongst the 72 boards, that's only like $6 million. I think she said $6.1 million for the board. I mean, in a board of $800 million expenditures, like a huge amount of money. Like $6 million is not that much money. Like how do you when you divvy that up amongst all the different schools, elementary and secondary? I mean, we're talking pennies virtually in the grand scheme of things. And yeah, I mean, how do you stretch that? Where do you spend it on? Do you spend it on upgrading ventilation? Do you hire a handful of more teachers? Do you try and rent a few more spaces to find some more space for kids? It's an unenviable situation that I think the board trustees for both Catholic and public are in right now.
And a fact that keeps on coming back to me, and I can't remember where I read this eventually. I think it may have been on one of the school board websites, actually, that in terms of increasing hygiene and cleanliness around the schools, cleaning surfaces, things like that, the new standard is that every table that's used by children is now going to be cleaned once a week. That's the new standard. That's not the old standard. Before that, they weren't cleaning them every week. Now they are. And that's going to stop seriously? It seems...
This would be editorializing after that. I find that we're doing the bare minimum. I really do. I don't think... And I'm not blaming the school boards for this. I don't. I think it's they just don't have the funds or the resources to do it, and we're scrambling to pull this together, and it's just, I find it's shocking. I mean, it's going to be a trying start of the year, and I think parents are rightfully stressed out. If you're a parent and you're listening to this, I'm right there with you. You want to do what's best for your kid. You want them to be in a situation where they're comfortable, they're going to learn, they're going to be amongst peers, in an environment that you trust, that you think is safe for them. But right now we don't know that that's safe. And the alternative, distance learning, it doesn't look to be a viable option either. We know that distance learning at the start of this was, I think it was full of hope, but it turned out to be a failure in the end. Now, I think that the boards, hopefully it sounded like they did learn some lessons from that, and hopefully it will be enough to fill some of those gaps. But at the end of the day, I just don't think our parents have the confidence in the system right now, and I don't know how you build that up in 3 weeks to go.
Yeah, and I think we all accept that there's probably no perfect solution right now. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, hopefully a pandemic we currently have under control. there are no perfect solutions. That's fine. We all, so we have to do the best we can. But the question is, are we doing the best we can? If the province is ultimately as concerned about the economy by sending children back to school as it is about anything else, then it's money we're talking about. If it's the economy, then spend the money to get the economy going, and invest that in the schools, because it will pay for itself in the business that we're making. So, I certainly appreciate the kind of view that we're a province that already has plenty of debt. We've just taken on a huge bundle more, and that the purse only holds so much. Well, actually, that's really bad economics when people say that. So I kind of object to that to start with. But also, we saw in 2008 that governments can really mitigate the worst of a financial crisis through expenditure. This is a case where expenditure is needed.
Well, I think it's kind of telling. Like Doug Ford, Premier Ford, was down in Windsor last week, just before Minister Lecce made his big $500 million announcement. He was in Windsor. Ford was in Windsor touting how he's going to find money for all these infrastructure projects down in the Windsor Essex, and money for a new hospital in Windsor Essex, and all this. And he was boasting about how he's, he's going to go talk to the Treasury Board and the Minister of Finance for Ontario, and he's going to find that money no matter what. And fair enough. I'm not going to say Windsor Essex doesn't deserve a hospital, but where's that enthusiasm and that drive to find money for the education system? Where's that like the best we can come up with is $500 million of the school board's money. It's not additional funds; it's money that the school boards have, and then the top it off is $300 million. There's more money being given to OLG than there are to the school boards.
Well, and more money was given to beer companies when they broke the contract. Right. It sounds like an awful lot of money. It's not actually a big amount of money. And maybe frankly, if it's about the economy and getting people back to work, then you probably need to be spending serious whacks of money.
Well, I think it's going to come back and bite them in the butt, because if we end up going back into another lockdown, if we get an outbreak in our schools that we are forced to go into lockdown again, the economy is going to come grinding back to a halt. Because if parents have to all of a sudden choose between job or staying at home and teaching their kids, I don't think anyone's going to be happy about it. I think parents are going to naturally choose their children, especially if they're of elementary age. It's just I think we might be having another problem just in October or November if this second wave, which everyone says is going to hit, when it hits, I just don't know what we're going to do.
And that's the final point I think we should make before we move on. That we're making. All this is about planning for the best case scenario. This is about planning for children at schools where the levels stay around where they are now. There's little or no planning for what happens when cases are rising at a high speed again. Mm-hmm. And then we need another plan. And it's like, no, you should be making that plan now. Anyway, let's stop ranting about that one and rant about something else.
Sure.
And this is just our take. The trustees gave probably a far more rounded and fair perspective than you and I will do. But these are, from that perspective, just reflecting, I think, what a lot of parents feel. Certainly, yourself, you're dealing with this directly. Mm-hmm. Okay, so we're going to move on now to our kind of other things in the news section. And last week, one of those topics was the ranked ballots being discussed at Burlington Council. I broke my own moratorium against doing delegations at City Hall and did a delegation, which obviously is not a City Hall at the moment, but done online. And so I gave a little speech about why I think ranked ballots are a good idea. And then Council spent the next 12 hours talking about lots of other things that were on the agenda that day and ran out of time for ranked ballots, so it didn't even end up being discussed. But it will come back at the next cycle of that particular committee, which has a name which is so long and complex that I can't remember the name of it. And actually, that brings me on to another subject that we've had some feedback, and I say we've had some very positive feedback. In fact, nearly all positive, for which many thanks to the people who've sent nice comments our way about the podcast. And someone corrected me on the name of the committee that I delegated to that I said wrong last week, and now I can't even remember it at all. So it's something like community services and something. They used to be called like the committee of the whole or something. They changed all the names, and I understand why they changed them because the old names didn't make a lot of sense, but at least they were somewhat more memorable. I don't know. Anyway, thanks for the feedback. Really appreciate that. And we'll be following up certainly about the rank ballot issues in the weeks ahead. Burlington is the latest city in Ontario to look at ranked ballots. And I think it's important that this is a subject that doesn't sort of go by without attracting any comment or interest at all. As I said, I'm very... it's an issue that's really one of my kind of pet projects, I guess. So you'll have to... If you're not interested, too bad. You'll have to listen to me talking about it. And the other big one, and this is definitely something we're going to be dealing with in the weeks and months ahead as well, is the provincial government about 10 days ago announced that it's going to be building a new 400 series highway that joins the 400 north of, basically north of Vaughan. It takes a semicircular route past Brampton, through Caledon, skirts around Georgetown, and then joins with the 407, 401 at close to Trafalgar, Winston Churchill area at the 401. Well, you and I know a little bit about highways from
Yes.
almost a decade ago, and they brought
This is an issue that always keeps coming back up. It's the issue that never goes away, and it's. I remember. I'll be honest. We about 10 years ago, I ran a campaign, a provincial member campaign in Burlington, and our tagline was, we were opposed to the hospital. Opposed to the highway. We'd rather the money go in favor of the hospital, Joe Brandt at the time. Because this is the thing, is that we're running out of space to build these highways, and they're not getting the job done. I mean, the last big highway that was built was the 407, and it was meant to alleviate all the congestion on the 401, and it does not do that. The 401 and the 403 are still as congested as ever in the commuting hours of the day. So I don't know what another highway is going to do.
I mean, this is 1970s thinking in a 2020s government, I'm afraid, and it's. Again, folks listening at home, if you're listening for journalistic independence and neutrality, you're not going to get it here.
Nope.
This is a terrible idea. This is the wrong thing to do. There was a report done in 2017 by the previous provincial government. The report was done by, it was an expert panel rather than the minister making it up on the fly. And the expert panel said this is not actually needed in this format. The same ends. If you're talking about promoting the economy again and getting people moving, there are other ways to do it that work as well, if not better. And we're really looking now at a bypass around a bypass around a bypass. I mean, the original bypass was the 401 to get around Toronto. Then we had the 407, and now we have whatever this will be. It doesn't fix the problem. The 401 was once upon a time a 4-lane highway. I think its widest point is something like 15 lanes now or something. I can't remember the exact figure. You can keep on adding lanes forever, and they will fill up with cars. It's called induced demand. And sure, does it help? Does it promote the economy? Well, yeah, it does. But I mean, there are certain things that even saying creating jobs is not an excuse for. You can create the same jobs in a different way without.
It's a temporary boost to the economy. All it does is just creates jobs to build the thing. But once the construction is finished, those jobs go away. The fact is, the proposed highway, if I'm not mistaken, there's talk of it even going as far down to the border. So it cut through the Niagara Peninsula and through all the farmland that is on the peninsula, on the vineyards that are a major source of those create jobs. That's the winery industry that is so important to Ontario and the country, we're going to just cut, a big chunk of highway through it because, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. I think it'll be I think it turns into one of these ideas that I think the generations from now, they're going to look at us and say, what were you thinking?
Where does it end? You can keep on building highways forever, and those highways will be used. And for the first year or two, they'll be great. They'll like, oh, we can get here really quick. And then after a few years, it's like, hell, there's a hell of a traffic jam on this highway now. You simply can't keep doing it. And the loss of greenbelt, the loss of some of the best farming land in Canada.
Absolutely.
And most we don't have an endless supply of farming land in Canada or in Ontario because so much of our land is Canadian Shield or basically you can't do much with it apart from mine there.
It has to be pointed out though that land, like agriculture, is a major industry. People don't realize it, but like farm producing, like growing food, results in a massive industry. Not just growing it and picking it, and the manual labor for that, but then you have the food processing. Having it turned into frozen food, into frozen bags of carrots and peas and corn and all that stuff. That actually creates jobs, and that's an industry that it's never going to go away. We all need to eat. Like that industry will never go out of favor.
Yeah, and you can say, well, the population is growing. We need more jobs. We need more houses. We need this. Well, we need more food too. And if we're not growing it ourselves, then we're having to import it. And that brings its own environmental problems, plus dependency on the US or whatever other country. It's short-sighted. It's so 20th century in outlook, and that the car is the only cure to everything. And right now we're in a pandemic where we've all started working from home in a way that most of us were not able to before. And many of us would quite like to at least continue to have it as an option, as a part of our daily life, rather than carting into Toronto 2 hours each way or whatever every single day of the week. We should be looking at how can we get people to work efficiently where they don't have to spend half their lives in a car.
Absolutely. Why don't we leave it at that?
It really is.
Why don't we leave it at that for today? Because I think that's a whole other, might be another episode in itself.
For sure, absolutely, it will be. Well, lots of things to talk about certainly this week and every week, and we're certainly not struggling to fill up our time allocation. So for this week, thanks again, Joel. And
I will say this, Roland. We should remind listeners, if they do have questions or feedback, email us at info@905er.ca. You can also find us on the web at www.905er.ca, as well as on Twitter and Facebook. And drop us a line there. We'd love to hear from you and tell us how we're doing.
Thanks, Joel, for reminding me about that every week, because I always forget. Yeah, fantastic. Okay, thanks, and we'll speak to you next week. Bye.
You looking to make the most out of this life and optimize your personal wellness? Then check out the Natural Man Podcast. Join me, host Mike C., as we explore all areas of human wellness, physical, mental, and emotional. Learn strategies to optimize your own well-being and be in the driver's seat of your own health. Remember, your doctor works for you. Learn biohacks, neurohacks, ways to improve sleep, and ways to optimize your body and your mind. Check us out on Apple, Spotify, the Fountain app, and at naturalmanpodcast.com.